is up, everybody? So I'm picking back up where I left off last time, reading old newspaper articles about Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey and the Making a Murderer series. Of course, right now we are all the way back in October 2003, I believe it is. Yes, this article is from the Janesville Gazette from October 5th, 2003. It is about the original sentence that Steven Avery had, the 18 years in prison for the crime he did not commit. Now, this article, which I will put up on the screen, the headline states, picking up where I left off, man wrongly imprisoned for 18 years gets on with his life. It states, Steven Avery, who spent 18 years in prison for a brutal rape he did not commit, pops open the hood of his new car, a 1985 Chevrolet Monte Carlo he bought for $25. Jeez, that's a cheap car. Bought for $25 from a police impound yard, and a proud smile lights up his face. The blue two-door T-top needs some work. I would assume it needs a lot of work if you paid $25 for it, including a new fuel pump, and Avery, 43, savors the chance to crawl underneath the car and get grit beneath his fingernails and feel the joy of again doing something he loves. I got locked up in 1985 and I am kind of picking up where I left off, until DNA testing finally proved he was innocent of the 1985 rape. The closest Avery got to his passion for cars was reading about them in magazines he kept with him in 5 different prisons where he was held. I want the car looking nice, Avery said, smiling through a thick beard that flowed down to his chest. Avery laughs often, the anger and bitterness over the horrible ordeal seemingly long gone. He's pleased and surprised the state will investigate how he was wrongfully convicted. As long as I am free, it's over, he said. I thought it was going to be a little tougher to adapt, but it ain't so bad. Avery is back living with his parents near Two Rivers, sleeping in a room packed with boxes full of 18 years of stuff. His mother, Dolores, I don't know if he's any different. He's doing fine. Avery spends his days mostly helping his 2 brothers in their auto salvage business. He calls it the junkyard, and reorganizing his life. He plans to build a new room for his mother onto her home. He takes each day as it comes, including a job offer from a Manitowoc business and a letter of apology from his accuser. He learned patience in prison. I don't take nothing for granted. Avery, the divorced father of 5 now grown children, was freed from prison September 11th after a jury convicted him of sexually assaulting a woman jogging on a Lake Michigan beach in 1985. A judge sentenced him to 32 years in prison. Now it just goes over here. The rest of that part is what we've already talked about previously. And then it continues to state, as for work, he takes on simple tasks such as shoveling scoops of gravel from the pile that his brother dumped from a truck to fill some ground at the salvage yard. Avery welcomes the sweat that beads on his brow and the calories he burns. He put on some weight in prison. A huge loader that could level the gravel pile sits idly nearby as Avery shovels away. He doesn't know how to work that yet. We got to show him, says his older brother Chuck. Avery's first big purchase with the $500 he saved in prison was for his new car. $60 for 4 floodlights to mount on the front bumper. He also put a new rear end into the car. It was kind of greasy, Avery said, but I wasn't so bad. He's still adjusting to wrenches with the metric merits. They weren't common when he went to prison. Stuff like that's crazy. Like, if you went to prison 20 years ago and now you're coming out with iPhones and things like that, man, what a different world it would be for somebody like that. So terrible. Avery shimmies under the car to make the final connections to the new fuel pump, grabbing tools that were a Christmas gift he finally opened when he came home. Just weeks earlier, about the same time in prison, he might have been in an outside yard, perhaps sitting at a table, drinking coffee, dreaming about cars, or waiting for nightfall, when he would count airplanes flying overhead. Just weeks ago, Avery could buy a Diet Coke at the prison at Stanley for 23 cents. He gasped at the $5 price of 2 malts he bought as a free man. In his last job in prison as a janitor, his pay was about 35 cents an hour. Man, That is crazy. Now, the next article is from the Janesville Gazette as well, from October 9th, 2003. It's talking about the compensation Steven Avery should get. The article is "Fair Compensation Justified for Avery." Imagine authorities bursting into your home, arresting you for sexual assault, and leading you out in handcuffs while your frightened children and wife watch in bewilderment. Then, despite repeated denials and the testimony of 16 witnesses who place you elsewhere on the afternoon of the attack, imagine you're convicted and spend the next 18 years in prison. Imagine having 16 witnesses and the jury and the prosecution and everyone else not listening to those 16 witnesses, and spend the next 18 years in prison for a crime you didn't commit. In the meantime, your wife divorces you and your kids grow up without you. That's what happened to Steven Avery. He was released from prison on September 11th after DNA evidence exonerated him. The state is more than justified in reviewing the investigation and prosecution of Avery, and though the state law compensation for wrongful imprisonment is at $25,000, that's clearly not enough. That is not even in the universe of enough. State and Manitowoc County prosecutors hope reviewing the case will answer questions for the public that might bring safeguards to prevent a repeat. It also might help the legislator realize the importance of adequate staffing for those analyzing DNA samples in the state crime lab. It states negotiators should move quickly on a 5-year, $1 billion bill that will provide states with greater access to DNA testing for death row inmates and in rape cases. His exoneration was the first under Wisconsin state's DNA testing statute adopted in 2001. It requires that biological evidence can be preserved as long as anyone remains in custody and provides the right to post-conviction DNA testing. The Milwaukee Journal reviewed more than 1,000 pages of documents and reports that found the authorities made a suspect of Avery so quickly that the case became a virtual steamroller. Geez. That sounds very familiar once again. His photo so closely resembled that of the convict now accused by the DNA evidence that they could have passed for brothers. Avery's own history didn't help his case. He had 2 prior burglary convictions, and 6 months before the attack he had been accused of using a rifle to try to abduct the wife of a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy. The rape victim's testimony was powerful, yet mistaken. Question remains, how could the court ignore 16 witnesses who support Steven Avery's alibi? Man, that is absolutely bonkers. Avery has returned to work in the family junkyard, hopes to reestablish relationship with his 5 children. Though the bitterness and anger have passed, he thinks a compensation of $1 million a year would be fair and is exploring litigation options. In a similar case in Maryland, DNA evidence exonerated Kirk Bloodsworth of a 1984 rape and murder of a child. He was the first U.S. death row prisoner exonerated by DNA. Wow, did not know that. I'm going to have to look into that one. For his 9 years of imprisonment, he was paid $300,000 in 1993. Wisconsin compensation law enacted in 1913. Time to update that. Certainly justifies the notion of changing the statute and paying Avery $450,000 or $25,000 per year of incarceration. He deserved way more, but we all know what happened. Allegedly because of that money. Now, the last article here from October 20th, 2003. Now, this is only a partial article because it says see page C2, but again, there was no page C2 that I could locate. It talks about the DNA testing being slowed due to a backlog. It states hundreds of cases are waiting to be tested, and one case usually takes up to a week. Evidence in more than 500 cases sat on a Wisconsin crime lab shelves at the end of September, waiting for DNA tests that could decide the fate of hundreds of people. An Associated Press review of the crime lab statistics found DNA testing has come to the forefront in Wisconsin recently after DNA tests proved that Steven Avery of Two Rivers spent 18 years in prison for a crime of rape he never committed, but crime lab officials say they were overwhelmed by the sheer volumes of investigators' requests as the science grows. The ideal world, you send it to them, they make their decisions, and they send it back to you the next day. But we can't turn around cases as quickly as we should. The crush of cases is a big part of it, frankly. DNA is a variety. It talks about what DNA testing is, but it states there was a backlog. That's why Steven Avery had to wait so long. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's probably tons and tons of cases, but there was definitely more to it. Allegedly, of course. So those are a few more articles from 2003 about Steven Avery's original arrest and false imprisonment. What do you think? Let me know. Leave some comments below. I hope you're having a good day, and I'll see you again soon.